Hey everyone, welcome to the Week 13 NFL edition of the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast brought to you by FantasyLabs of the Action Network. I'm Matthew Freedman, the editor-in-chief. For 1 week, I have reclaimed the Iron Throne as the host of the show, and I've exiled Brian Mears to the wall. Peter Jennings is also missing. He's taking the rare post-Thanksgiving bye week, so Adam Levitan, the Levitanimal, is filling in for him. It's good to have Levitan back on the show. And then we have Ian, a fellow lab rat who's filling in for me as I fill in for Brian. So it's good to have the NFL team assembled, brofos, if I may. How's it going? Levitan, you had a pretty epic Week 12 cash game performance.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about that. I have a few other points I want to make here. First of all, it's great to be back on the Fantasy Flex. This is the first time I've been on the Fantasy Flex since it's been the Flex brought to you by the Action Network. So really pleased, hashtag corporate life, to be back on that. Second of all, Freedman welcomed me back by not even getting a guest from outside of the FantasyLabs realm. I see these great guests. You got Silva on, you got all these other people on. Then I show up. We don't have any guests at all. Thirdly, I want to say maybe some of you guys, I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't know Ian that well. Ian is the man behind everything at FantasyLabs NFL, crushing on Twitter, crushing. I don't even know how Ian's doing the video things on Twitter, crushing on news, crushing with the projections and the models. So shout out to Ian, and I'm glad we have Freedman on here. I actually am glad we don't have a guest because I need Freedman takes. I don't think people realize Freedman is like a four-time PhD recipient and way too smart to be talking about fantasy football every day. So that's my introduction. It's great to be back. Looking forward to it.
You've built the show up to a level we cannot possibly fulfill all of the expectations that you set for the show. But a couple of things. One, I tried to get some guests, but when they heard that Brian and Pete weren't going to be here, they were like, okay, just check back with us next week. So I was facing some insurmountable barriers. But then two, you were definitely right about Ian. He is doing great work for us. And actually this week he's going to be doing the running back and wide receiver breakdowns while I do some other pieces for us. So excited to see what Ian does for those pieces. And it's awesome to have Ian on the show. Ian, how's it going?
Yeah, thanks for the intros, dudes. Doing good. Great to finally already be in Week 13. Crazy to say that. And getting on with it. Ready to talk some football, guys.
Yeah, and so Levitan mentioned that you do a lot of the news, and obviously Levitan does news. The biggest news item of the day, I mean, normally we don't start the show with news, but I feel like we kind of have to mention it. Eli Manning, no longer the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. And instead we have Geno Smith. The world is sort of ending. Geno Smith is about to be unleashed on another New York franchise. How do we digest this news?
Why is the world ending? This has been the worst offense in the NFL, or one of the worst offenses in the NFL for the last season, 12 months, I would say. And Geno averaged about 15 DK points per game when we last saw him as a starter. Geno sucks for sure. Is he worse than Eli at this point? I'm not so sure. And I think his mobility behind the offensive line will be better. I will say that I'm not sure he's necessarily in play on this slate if we think that they're going to play Davis Webb. So it's only Tuesday. That was one of my other points from the intro. Wanted to let all the people know. It is Tuesday at 8 p.m. Please, do not tweet me on Friday. You said on the Fantasy Flex that XYZ. It's Tuesday night. We're just getting into the swing of things. Everybody relax, okay? But anyways, as we sit here on Tuesday, I'm not sure that Geno's going to be able to be in play because it sounds like they want to get a look at Davis Webb. And we also have some other options below 5K on DK this week, which we can talk about for sure. But I think Trevor Siemian is certainly one that might have a slightly higher floor than Geno in a pretty similarly awesome matchup.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 years of Geno in the NFL, he was hamstrung. Rex Ryan as a Neanderthal head coach, Marty Mornhinweg as antiquated offensive play caller. when we saw him in limited action with Chan Gailey, he was actually fairly decent, which isn't like the greatest praise ever, but he wasn't like horrible. So maybe something to look forward to. Let's get into the show, and let's start with the real or fake segment. And Ian, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Out of the week of football that we saw, and we had two, I think pretty good slates with the Thanksgiving Day games and then also the main slate. What caught your eye in terms of something that's real and something that's fake that maybe can be applied for the rest of the season, or at least this week?
Yeah, for sure. Last few weeks, actually, this Chargers defense is for real, I think, at all three levels of that unit. I mean, it's incredible. They lost Jason Verrett in the first few weeks of the year, and now they already have three other guys that are already in PFF's top 15 corners. I mean, Casey Hayward is obviously a stud, but Desmond King, Trevor Williams, pretty good too. I think everyone knows about Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. I mean, they're bringing the heat off the edge, but this defense had a lot of trouble stopping the run early on in the season, but they got Denzel Perryman back in the middle a few weeks ago. What do? They promptly hold Fournette to like 30 yards on 17 carries. Shady got going a little bit, but they had another good performance against the Cowboys. And it's just looking like one of those defenses where, kind of with Jacksonville too, even if their run stats don't look great, I just think it's a really, really good overall unit and probably one just to stay away from in general. For the fake thing, I am selling Joe Mixon as a legit RB1. We waited this long. We finally got that big performance from him. But, I mean, that was his first game with a double-digit carries and averaging over 4.2 yards per attempt. So he's still running behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league. We saw the efficiency for 1 week. Maybe he can get it going. But I think might have just been more of a case of facing a Browns defense that is falling apart, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to keep that going on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I like those. And Ian, by the way, you definitely took what I was going to say in terms of real. I was going with the Chargers defense. And one thing to add on to what you said, the Chargers have held opponents to a league low. I need to think about how to phrase this. They have allowed opponents to hit their implied totals in only 3 of 11 games. So that's a really low number, like an elite number, best in the league. And then they have the two, in terms of PFF rankings, the two best edge pass rushers in the league in Ingram and Bosa. So just kind of incredible how strong they are in the pass defense phase of the game. And then, as you mentioned, with Perryman back, they should be getting better in the run defense too. Adam, what do you think is real and fake?
Yeah, one thing on Mixon's schedule is extremely difficult coming up. One of the hardest remaining running back schedules, I think, for Joe Mixon. For real, I am going to go with, Ian mentioned it, crumbling Browns defense. I think people got it stuck in their head that this Browns run defense is elite. And if you look at a lot of advanced metrics through the first half of the season and maybe the first 10 to 12, 10 games or so, 9 games, perhaps that's true. But when your quarterback consistently puts you in these situations in short fields where you're coming right back on the field when you're getting outplayed, and by outplayed, I mean your opponent is running so many plays at your defense, you run into problems like we saw them face in Cincinnati, who prior to that had a broken run game. And they've also seen a lot of injuries. I think they've had some injuries to their linebacking core, and the defensive line too, among run stuffers. That could be an issue going forward as well. So I think that's interesting as we get set for a Chargers home game against the Browns. And then fake, I don't want to be a hater, but like Alvin Kamara is 8,400 now, and it's hard for me to project him for more than 13, 14, 15 touches per game. And Alvin Kamara is an awesome player, right? When we see guys just going ham for 70-yard touchdowns, I am almost always going to be fading if their usage isn't there. It obviously bit me a lot with Odell Beckham early in his career. It didn't bite me when everybody was playing Chris Thompson at like 6,500, when everybody was playing Ty Fluke Hill at like 7,500. Like, these guys just are not getting enough work to be worth that price on DK. So yeah, if Kamara was 6,500, let me play him at 8,400. I'm going to go ahead and call it fake.
Yeah, Kamara, it seems a little bit like a repeat of what we saw from Kareem Hunt earlier in the season, with big performances, not a ton of usage, and then seeing the price escalate. I love how you're going to probably get in as many Ty Fluke hits as you can with Pete here, unable to defend his guy.
He would have no, like, I wish he was here. I mean, Alex Smith, like, who thought that Alex Smith suddenly changed everything in his 13th NFL season? That's insane. That's like, like you've been with your wife for 13 years and all of a sudden you start like performing unbelievably in bed. Like it's just not going to happen. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like it's just life.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, I listened to the Swallow cast today. I feel like between that and this, I'm just going to get way too much of the Levitan life perspective. It's too much. Like what was the bit you had about like you couldn't use the restroom at school? I mean, you were like total George Costanza.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, like the bathrooms at school are unacceptable, and in these type of situations, sometimes you just have to leave. I mean, it is what it is. But I'm pretty good at holding it. When I'm in a public place, like if I'm at a bar and all of a sudden I have to really go, number two, I'll either just leave or I'll go home and come back or something like that. One of the beauties of living in the city, really, go home and come back is always in play.
All right, so I would say that is fake. But in terms of football, what is fake is that I've seen for the last couple of weeks this idea, and not so much recently after this week, but previously this idea that the Jags are a sort of serious postseason team because of their defense. And I think that their defense is a Super Bowl caliber type of unit. Just based on what we've seen from them so far and the progression that they've made from last year to this year. But we've seen 2 weeks running teams pretty much give a blueprint for how you shut down that offense. You put a good cornerback on Marquise Lee, or even probably just an average cornerback on Marquise Lee. You stack the line of scrimmage, and then you make Blake Bortles pretend as if he can throw to someone else. And, like, boom, you hold them and they can't score points. I just don't see them being a team that can go far in the postseason with Bortles as their quarterback. But I think long-term, still a really intriguing team with the strides that they've made on that defense. Maybe in this offseason they can somehow address the quarterback position. But I don't see a Super Bowl run this year, even though there are people at the Action Network who are talking about it. Let's talk about some of the chalk locks or potential guys that we're interested in for cash games. Again, as Levitan mentioned, it is early in the week, so this is sort of first impressions, and some of this will definitely be massaged later as we get news and do more research. But right now, Adam, who are the guys that you were thinking about locking into your cash game lineups?
Yes, so I think from a roster construction standpoint, like a lot of people make the mistake, like I have to have X 8K guy or I have to have X 9K guy, and then they build from there. I think you would do a lot better to start with the cheapest guy at each position that you really like and kind of build up from there. So my initial thought was like the cheapest guy that I really liked a lot at wide receiver to start was Cooper Kupp. In this matchup against the Cardinals, we'll obviously see Patrick Peterson on Sammy Watkins. Do not expect Robert Woods back for this game. And Cooper Kupp obviously has like major chemistry going with Jared Goff. So they do not need any more excuse to get targets, but we'll certainly see that with the Pearson situation and with Robert Woods remaining out. So that was kind of one that stood out to me. He has gone up in price a lot, up to $6,400 after $5K last week, but that's kind of the price you have to pay. And then at running back, assuming that both Seniorice Perry and Damian Williams are out, Kenyon Drake at 4,900 is going to have a 15 to 20 touch projection. And when I kind of think about these cheap running backs, I like to think about, are they game flow dependent? And in Kenyon Drake's case, certainly not very good in the pass game. And does his team have a chance to like win the game and not just get like totally trucked? Like that was kind of one of the problems with Devontae Booker last week. It's like, you're going up to Oakland, which, yeah, in theory is a good matchup, but like you're going with Paxton Lynch, you could just get absolutely trucked. I don't see the Dolphins getting trucked by this version of the Denver team. So 4,900 on Kenyon Drake, I think, is a very fair price for a guy who plays as well as he does in the pass game.
Mm-hmm. Ian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Adam nailed some of the cheaper guys. Also liked Seth Roberts just as a cheaper receiver option with Crabtree suspended and Cooper likely out with that concussion and sprained ankle. That really terrible play for him. But other two guys, Tevin Coleman, I think is still a little too cheap, assuming Devontae Freeman's out. Seeing what he's done with this role has really been exciting for his prospects as a true RB1. I mean, the guy had 7 red zone rushes from weeks 1 to 9. He's already had 13 in the last 3 weeks. since Freeman's gone down. So even if they can get that pass game usage up a tad, obviously Vikings run these tougher than he's seen a bit. But, I mean, going back to the beginning of last season, the Vikings have allowed an additional 5 points per game on the road. So not really the same defense and outside of Minnesota. And then wide receiver, I mean, he's a little bit expensive still, but DeAndre Hopkins, man, I have not seen anyone else really bring his floor and ceiling combination to the table. Tom Savage is getting him the ball 12 times a game, actually putting it in his facility, unlike Osweiler. And, I mean, he's gotten 14 DraftKings points in 9 of 10 games this year. So I thought the 7,300 price tag was actually a little low. I mean, that's kind of what he was at earlier in the season before we saw he was back to being the DeAndre Hopkins we knew. So, yeah, just those two guys. I think they both have really high floors and have that potential for a big ceiling as well.
Yeah, I like the DeAndre Hopkins call. He's the guy who is on my list. And you mentioned Seth Roberts, someone in that vein that I'm interested in, although I don't know if I would actually lock him in. But Jared Cook going against the Giants, who are notoriously bad this year against tight ends with no Crabtree and no Cooper. And Cook has basically functioned as a big slot receiver in that offense, basically the number 3 receiver for them. So I could see him getting some more action, but I mean, I don't know if you ever really want to go down with that ship of trusting Jared Cook in cash. It would be sort of like famous last words. I am interested in Melvin Gordon as someone who's not super expensive, but still on the pricier side. I mean, I'm not like a Melvin Gordon truther. I think he's horribly inefficient, and now he's starting to get some of his action cut in by Austin Eckler. But a big home favorite, and Adam mentioned earlier that even if it is a situation where the Browns have some decent efficiency numbers against the run, that really doesn't matter so much because they're just getting pounded so relentlessly, and they're starting with bad field position. So you have the Chargers at home as 14-point favorites. I mean, it's hard to imagine a situation in which Ingram doesn't have a really good chance of scoring a touchdown in some facet of the game, either as a runner or as a receiver. I'm interested in quarterbacks. I mean, it's never a great situation to pay up, so I don't know if anyone's really going to be looking too much at Tom Brady, especially because it's not a great matchup. But he's someone who's in play just because he has been playing well. And then also, any thoughts on Cam Newton at the Superdome going against the Saints defense? And you guys would probably have some news on this, whether those cornerbacks, those outside cornerbacks are going to be back this week. Because if they're not, it's basically a different defense if they aren't there. Not that there's much to trust with Cam Newton throwing the ball. Who knows he's going to be throwing to at the wide receiver position. But there's some potential there, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on the corners yet. I know Alex Okafor, I think, is a bigger loss than people give it credit for off the edge. But I don't know, Ian, have you seen anything on the corners?
No, nothing for sure yet. But, I mean, neither of them were even able to get to practice last week. So definitely a questionable situation again here. I will say, Freedman, you mentioned not really sure who he's going to go to with the wide receivers. It was good to see Funches get those season-high 12 targets last week. I mean, he had terrible splits with Olsen in the lineup. Thought a lot of that was because most of those games came with him as a rookie or with Benjamin involved. But, I mean, he's there. He's locked in as our number one. If that Olsen foot injury is going to keep him out again, I think he's a good stack partner for him.
Yeah, no, I just been sort of like, I guess he can give Funches like 15 targets per game, but thinking about like if there's anyone else that he can really throw to, I mean, you'd hope that there maybe would be more than one receiving option for him if you're looking to go with him in cash. But obviously a big part of his value comes through his ability in the running game. Let's talk a little bit about players that we might be interested in fading or players we might be interested in pivoting to. Levitan, let's start with you. Any players on your radar right now?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said about Jared Cook, but even you had like this hesitation in there, like, well, it's really tough trusting Jared Cook in cash. And like a lot of times if you're playing a lot of cash, you can kind of feel which players you don't feel that great about. And then even if you do play them in cash, it's worth considering fading them in GPPs. So Jared Cook on DK specifically is expensive at 5,400. Like he's 700 more than Hunter Henry, 900 more than Kyle Rudolph, only 200 less than Delaney Walker. I think that Jared Cook, if his ownership gets over 20%, And right now I have it at like 17 to 20. If it gets over 20%, I think that would be a pretty interesting fade. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have anybody projected over 25% right now. I have the highest owned guys right now, Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp. Brandon Cooks has been so hot just from a regression standpoint. He could be an interesting fade, but probably only a fade for me if Chris Hogan is back, and we'll see on that. We probably won't have any news on that until Wednesday.
I would be surprised if Hogan is back, but I mean, you never know. Ian, who are some of the players you're looking at right now in terms of either fading or guys you might pivot to?
Yeah, just quickly on Hogan, same thing, kind of mentioned with those Saints corners. He hasn't even practiced in these previous weeks, so we'll definitely need to see a lot from him this week. A couple potential fades. I've been souring on Leonard Fournette as the year's gone on. Ever since he's come back from his ankle injury, TJ Yeldon's still been active, and they just really seem to trust him more in pass protection and receiving. I mean, Fournette's still getting 20 touches a game when things are going okay, but I mean, Yeldon played more snaps last week, and they were at home against the Cardinals. I mean, that's a game I don't think anyone really saw going that way, but unfortunately, now that Fournette's not locked into this 80% snap role, we got to be aware of those now. So I think maybe going down from Fournette to LaShawn McCoy is an option. Shady at home. He's really had a lot of success against the Patriots during his time in Buffalo. And with his switch from Mike Tolbert to Travis Cadet, we don't have that vulture to worry about inside the 5-yard line anymore. Another situation, I'm not as high on Kupp as some others. I'm pretty fine with pivoting down to Stephon Diggs. I think this is a situation where he's healthy at this point in the year. He hasn't gone off in a few weeks, but not having those lingering groin calf issues we've seen in years past, and his price tag is as low as it's been since week 3. Crunched some numbers today and was interested to find that Diggs has actually averaged about 5.5 additional DraftKings points in his 13 games indoors. So he had those 2015 games where their home field was actually outdoors, but he's really balled out inside. And I think just when you watch how good of a route runner he is, that makes sense. So yeah, give me all the Stephon Diggs I can get this week.
I like that. Nice splits there. Some guys that I'm interested in maybe pivoting to, or some guys that I think will have lower ownership relative to their price points or their upside. I'm interested in Gabbert, and I know that's sort of like disgusting to say, but he's playing the best football of his career, which is like, it's probably like a really low threshold statement to make. But he's looked pretty good recently. Last week had the toughest matchup you can have in the league, going against the Jags, and maybe there was some like, hashtag revenge narrative there for him, but he's looked, decent. He's being aggressive. He's not taking a lot of sacks. Bruce Arians just today came out and said that he thinks Gabbert could be the starting quarterback next year, regardless of whatever happens with Carson Palmer, which, I mean, I don't know if that's a real statement or not, but Gabbert is intriguing, and he did look pretty good in the preseason. He was, serviceable in his last couple of years with the 49ers. So I think there's something there, and I think his ownership will still be low enough because of how strong that impression is from his Jacksonville days that people probably still won't want to invest in, especially because he does have a tougher matchup against the Rams, but still I don't think it's a matchup that he can't overcome. At the running back position, guys I'm interested in are Kareem Hunt. I think he'll have lower ownership just because he's totally torched owners the last 2 weeks at really high ownership. But he's still 3rd in scrimmage yards and 5th in touches. And he hasn't been this cheap since week 2. So if you can get a guy who's still, in the aggregate over the course of the season has been productive and is getting touches, and he's cheaper than he's basically been all year, and he's going to have reduced ownership, I think it's a decent spot to invest once again, but, burn your money. Duke Johnson is someone I'm interested in going against the Chargers, who are exploitable by running backs, especially pass-catching running backs. And Duke Johnson, I think a lot of it has to do with game script. He's been able to get more snaps than Isaiah Crowell over the season. He leads the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns from scrimmage. So I think there's some opportunity there for him. At wide receiver, someone I think is going to be I don't know if under-owned is the right word, but he's going to have lower ownership, is Jordy Nelson. And he has a nice matchup. He has shown absolutely no chemistry at all with Brett Hundley. So that is a big red flag, but I think at some point there has to be some touchdown progression because he's still getting like 6 targets per game with Hundley, just not getting into the end zone. At some point, I think we have to see him score. Hopefully, yeah, it has to happen at some point, but Kenny Stills is another guy I'm interested in. I think he has a decent matchup against the Broncos, who aren't nearly as good in pass defense as they have been in previous years. They've allowed a league-high 24 receiving touchdowns, and there's maybe a caveat with this if Matt Moore plays. And I don't know how much stock I want to put into the splits he has with Matt Moore, but he's just been, like twice, like 2.5 times more as productive with Matt Moore throwing him the ball compared to Jay Cutler or Ryan Tannehill. So something to keep an eye on there. Let's talk about some stacks. Conventional stacks that we would be interested in. And I think some of this would probably dovetail with the guys that we've already talked about. But Ian, let's start with you. What are some of the stacks that you are interested in?
Yeah, just one quick thing too, in that Broncos matchup, definitely going to benefit from Talib being suspended for a game as well. So, but yeah, conventional stacks, one we kind of touched on, but yeah, I like this Cam Newton matchup. Probably with Funches, maybe McCaffrey's a little expensive with the not enough work recently. But yeah, I mean, Newton's played 3 games in New Orleans over the past 3 years, and he scored over 31 DraftKings points in each game. Obviously, the Saints defense has been much improved this year, and we've been over that. But again, no Okafor, potentially no Lattimore, potentially no Crawley. Now all of a sudden we're looking back at the Coors field of fantasy football we all loved up until about 5 weeks ago. Other than that, I also like Melvin Gordon, this Chargers defense. We've talked about why we like the Chargers defense. Gordon's volume's still been there, even with Eckler emerging a little bit. Do have some numbers behind that kind of Browns defense collapse that we were talking about. They gave up an average of 94 rushing yards per game in weeks 1 through 9. That's ballooned up to 131 in their 3 weeks since their bye week. So, even Melvin Gordon, love that rushing volume, and he's always there as a receiver as well.
Levitan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the chalky stack would be Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen, considering how hot Keenan's been. I know he'll likely see some of Jason McCourty when he's on the outside, but they've used Keenan all over the field. And this dude, on slants and, man, I mean, he is getting tons of separation. So I'm not going to go overboard on, this Jason McCourty thing and act like he's Patrick Peterson all of a sudden. So I think Phillip Rivers, he's $7K now. He is extremely expensive. Keenan Allen is up to 8,300 after being 5,900 just 2 weeks ago. Is extremely expensive, but in terms of a high floor stack, I think he can do well there.
One thing with this slate in particular is that so in previous weeks, there's almost always been at least one game or 2 games that were way above the others in terms of game totals. Or having a team that had an implied total that was so much higher than any other teams. And we really don't have that this week. One fantastic smash spot for 2 teams to game stack or anything like that. So I think it makes the exercise of figuring out ownership percentages or doing projections a little bit harder. But some chalkier, potential stacks I'm interested in. Still, interested in the Patriots. One thing we should actually probably mention, on FanDuel, we actually still have the Eagles available going against the Seahawks. So that is something for people to keep in mind playing there. Carson Wentz will be interesting, I think, going against the secondary for the Seahawks, which is very thinned out. Not to say that he's someone you should go for in cash, but I would be interested in stacking him with some of his receivers there. And then I'm still interested probably not in Kamara because, as Levitan mentioned, is expensive, but I think Ingram and, maybe going kind of – this would be more contrarian and we can transition there, but I think Ingram and maybe still stacking with the defense. Maybe the defense is still able to – I don't know, be not horrible as they've been for parts of the year, even if they are missing some of their key defenders. I think that gets into the question of what makes a defense. Like I know that sounds like a stupid question, but like once you take away certain defenders, like is the defense still the defense? Like can they withstand those losses? Or like when is it the point where that defense is basically like no longer the version of itself that it had been? And I'm starting to get interested in questions like that because like I feel from the offensive side of the ball, it is much easier to quantify the impact of certain players, especially quarterback. But then I think we're starting to branch into the area of being able to see more concretely what wide receivers are worth or what running backs are worth. In some cases, maybe even offensive linemen. I think it's still a lot harder to do that for defense. So given the idea that there's maybe more uncertainty with how to evaluate the absence of defensive players, I would maybe be interested in going a little heavier on the Saints defense just in case maybe they're able to be better than people think. Do you guys have any more thoughts potentially on contrarian stacks?
Yeah, the one I have written down is Trevor Siemian with his wide receivers. When you get benched for Brock Osweiler / Paxton Lynch, nobody wants to play you, but I think Trevor Siemian is far more capable than those guys. And this Miami defense, like I'm not sure people really realize, like they are maybe the worst in the league, like right there, West, I would say with the Raiders, just absolutely atrocious. And like their corners are so slow. So I think big chance for Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas. And one thing about playing Broncos stacks is that we typically know where the targets are going to go. So you don't have to usually don't have to worry about like Benny Fowler or Cody Latimer like coming in and stealing 6 targets. That usually doesn't happen. It usually all goes through Demaryius and Emmanuel, whose prices are down because they've been playing with Brock and Paxton Lynch for the last, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. So, yeah, I think that's at least interesting.
Ian, what do you got?
Yeah, definitely had a Simeon written down. Just going to add a thing or two to what Adam said. I'm definitely in agreement. But since Emmanuel Sanders got to Denver in 2014, he and Demaryius have had Peyton, Osweiler, Paxton Lynch, and Simeon at quarterback. Simeon is the only quarterback out of that group that Manny Sanders has outscored Demaryius with on a points per game basis. So I think we've seen Simeon actually play well earlier this season, towards the beginning of last season. He had a sprained shoulder like in week 4 this year. I think that had something to do with his drop off in play. So he should be at least a little bit healthier after this long stretch off. And like Adam was saying, a great matchup on D. Other stack I'll give is Adrian Peterson in the Cardinals defense. Again, contrarian. Wouldn't cash him, but he's got 20-plus carries in 4 or 6 games. I know he's old. I know he's not the same back, but Kerwin Williams is out. Man, AP had 5 targets last week. He caught 4 balls. I don't know. Maybe Sean Payton just wasn't using him right. But this Rams defense is sick. They shut down AP a few weeks ago in London. At the same time, they are ranked 20th in rush DVOA. It's going to be in Arizona. Maybe things are a little bit different. And if AP can get going downhill a little bit, they got Mark Barron, converted safety. And then with that defense correlation, obviously, and maybe Jared Goff without Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins is getting covered up, and maybe Honey Badger is back a little bit, and they take away Kupp, and Goff starts looking a little bit like Jeff Fisher Goff. So we'll see.
I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on the Jaguars at home. So, Ian, I know you said someone you'd be interested in fading is Leonard Fournette, but we do have the Jags at home as 9.5-point favorites going against the Colts, who have allowed the most points in the league to opposing teams. So it seems like a pretty decent spot for them. I believe Rashawn Melvin, the cornerback for the Colts, is injured. And so you guys would know better about that in terms of news than I would, but I think there's an injury issue there. So it might be a situation where Marquise Lee, who has been shut down in the last couple of weeks, has a little more capability to do something with his targets. Any thoughts there on any of the Jaguars players?
Yeah, Rashawn Melvin possibly done for the season. We know Vontae Davis has been out. This secondary was already really thinned out and bad. I think that from a scheme perspective, they've held up okay against number 1 receivers. Like we saw what they did to Antonio Brown that game. But I think without Rashawn Melvin, that's going to be a lot harder. for them, certainly a bounce back spot for Marquise Lee. I mean, anytime a guy faces Patrick Peterson, I'm always interested in looking at him the next week. And I would also note that the current president of hashtag Team Preseason, Dede Westbrook, ran a route on 34 of Blake Bortles' 37 dropbacks last week. We'll see what happens with Allen Hurns' injury, but Dede against this Colts defense at 4,100 certainly would intrigue me as well. So, yeah, I believe the last time these two teams met, Blake Bortles had a real big game. Certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, Dede got 10 targets last week. Didn't do much with them, but, I mean, still that at some point could turn into something. Ian, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Again, I mean, I get Fournette's 9.5-point favorite at home. It's hard to be too down on them, but this has been a different Colts defense over the last few weeks. I mean, they haven't had they got rid of Vontae. I don't think that's why they've suddenly improved, but I mean, the last 4 weeks they've allowed 12 fewer points per game, 40 fewer rushing yards per game than they were before. So they have been at least playing a little bit better recently, and I just have a hard time trusting Blake Bortles and even the best of the best matchups. Just for me, I guess more of I think some of the guys underneath Fournette, Shady, Melvin Gordon, the main two, no matter what happens in the game, they're going to get their work and they're going to be on the field. So that's just my one caveat there with Fournette.
All right. Let's get to some bold calls. So let's do some like one real life and then one that's more related to DFS. And Ian, let's start with you.
All right. Real bold call is Saints are going down again, this time in NOLA, and people are going to be upset. Even if they have those corners, I think the Panthers have a good enough offense that's kind of built to attack this defense. I mean, McCaffrey works that lower inner part of the field. If Olsen's healthy, he's obviously a threat down the seam. So, all those injuries on D, Panthers are not playing great every week, but they're still winning every week. And we've seen Cam at his best in New Orleans. So, give me a good Cam, and let's see what happens. And then my bold DFS call, Freedman, you hinted at this earlier, but I got Kareem Hunt going for over 100 yards and finding the end zone. One of these situations where everyone's off him this week because he had the smash spot last week and didn't do anything with it. But, yeah, like you said, I mean, same workload, same guy. And if we can get that with, fraction of the ownership and his cheapest price tag since week 3, let's see what happens.
I like it. Levitan, what do you got?
Before I go, we haven't even mentioned that the resurrection of Josh Gordon is happening this week.
Damn it. That was going to be my bold call.
I'm not going to – you can go for it as your bold call, but, where the ratings of this show are not going to be good. I mean, people want their Josh Gordon. They want their Josh Gordon takes, so I don't want to joke too much about the situation, but I kind of am look, man, he had 1,500 yards when he was playing out there hammered. I'm kind of worried that playing sober, he might regress a little bit. That's all I'm saying. Okay. For my real-life bold call, I will say the Seattle Seahawks as a 6-point home dog get the outright win over the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm aware this defense without Richard Sherman and without Cam Chancellor is a shell of itself, but you don't go across the country to one of the hardest places to play and waltz in there as a 6-point favorite. I think at some point the inept, I would say, Seahawks coaching staff, at least offensive play calling staff, realizes that running Eddie Lacy and whoever else into the middle of the line for the entire first half is just an utter waste of time. From the jump, they should be just throwing on every play with Russell Wilson using J.D. McKissic. So, I hope they see that against the Eagles. So they have absolutely no prayer whatsoever of running the football again. So that'll be my real-life bold call. For my fantasy bold call, let me go with Hunter Henry outscores the chalk Jared Cook by 14 DK points. Hunter Henry, a man who anytime he plays and is involved, the Chargers win. Hunter Henry, a man who is literally 30 years younger than Antonio Gates. Hunter Henry, a man who is extremely, extremely talented and involved in the red zone. And you could make a pretty good case that his matchup against the Browns is just as good as Jared Cook's matchup. So I'll go with that.
Am I the only one who's heard like the rumor or urban legend or something about Hunter Henry having a horse that he has named Hunter Henry? Have any of you guys heard of that? Or
I've not heard
No.
that. It sounds fantastic, though.
I hope that is true because that would really make me like him. Okay. I like the Hunter Henry call. Let me see. For my real life call, I'm going with the Cowboys losing in epic fashion. I think it's a travesty that they opened as 1.5 or 2-point favorites. That line has moved drastically in the other direction. Washington is now favored by a point. I think Washington wins by 10 on Thursday Night Football. Let's say at least 10. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they won by 20. I think the Cowboys are so ridiculously inept right now. So that would be my bold call. For DFS bold call, I would, like, in an optimistic universe, and this is coming from someone who kept Josh Gordon on IR for like 3 years on his dynasty team. Like, in an ideal world, I would want Josh Gordon just to come out and smash. But that's probably not going to happen, especially because he has a tough matchup going against that Chargers defense, which we talked about earlier in the show. Instead, I will go with Cooper Kupp having 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he's been so close to scoring touchdowns this year. He had that drop earlier this year. I can't remember who they were playing against. I think maybe it was against Seattle, but he had a drop in the end zone earlier. He fumbled at the 1-yard line like a week ago. I think at some point he starts turning some of those into touchdowns, and just based on the target volume, he definitely has the opportunity to get the yardage. So that's what I'm going to go with, a big week from Cooper Kupp. Okay, let's start to let's have like an abbreviated session, like a quicker session of the skill game propositions. Let's start with, I think, some quarterbacks. Levitan, is there? Do you want to get this started, or you want me to throw something out, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, I'll take Tom Brady, and you can have any other 2 quarterbacks for raw points.
Okay, and just to be sure, we're doing this on DK points.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Ian, do you want to go first? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'll take that. Tom Brady versus Cam Newton, and I'll also take Marcus Mariota.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I will do okay. Yeah, that's right. We can't do Russell Wilson. All right, I will do Rivers and Cam Newton. I like that. We didn't talk about Tyrod Taylor at all. Do you guys have any quick thoughts on him?
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's smashed at home, but really he hasn't played. I mean, he hasn't played that well against the Patriots the last few years. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes going this Sunday. But I mean, he's got the rushing floor. But I'm more on Shady this week. That Pats D is just really locked things up the last 7 or so weeks.
Yeah.
So when you start to think about like actually making a lineup, when Tyrod Taylor is only 900 more than the Geno Smith range, like that's where it starts to come in. So although I don't love Tyrod Taylor in this spot, I think the Patriots defense is just drastically improved, and they have so much tape on Tyrod Taylor and playing against Tyrod Taylor. That would concern me, but should he only be 900 more than Geno Smith? Like, of course the gap there is wider. So yeah, I think Tyrod is in play for sure.
All right. Interesting. I'm interested in taking the the under on Drew Brees if anybody wants the over. Right now we have him projected for 18.9.
Yeah, I mean, we saw like Josh McCown go ham on the Panthers. I don't know how how strong of a signal that was, but anytime you give me Drew Brees at home, I'm willing to be optimistic. So I'll give you some action.
Okay. Ian, you want to be on either side of that?
Yeah, I'll take the under on that. I'm kind of with you. I think, yeah.
Fine.
I picked the Panthers. I'm not liking this matchup with the Saints.
Fine. I'll take both of your action, both of your Coors Lights.
Fair enough.
All right. Let's.
We didn't mention Brett Hundley.
Oh, yeah.
I think people are going to play him because he has arguably the best possible matchup for a quarterback, and he's 5,100, and he played really well on Monday Night Football. How much does one game on Monday Night Football outweigh what he's done the previous 4, I think is the big question.
Go ahead, Ian.
Could that be a sneaky shootout? I don't know. I think if Jameis comes back, that Green Bay secondary is probably just as brutal. I see what you're saying, Adam. I'm not sold on Hundley either, but I don't know. That's 2 really bad defenses, and Hundley's at least shown the will to throw the ball downfield recently. So I don't know. There's not a lineup right now. So
can I push back against that a little bit? So I agree with the idea that it could be a sneaky shootout, definitely, because both of those secondaries are really weak. I think Hundley, the times when he was throwing it downfield, he was throwing it to some guys who got wide open because of busted coverage with the Steelers. And then a lot of his yardage was coming through short passes where guys were getting some good yards after the catch. Like, I still don't know if we've seen a transformation in Hundley. I'm more inclined to take it as a 1 week thing, and I will be, I guess, like, happy. I'll be, deliciously surprised if we see Hundley do something better than what he's done in his first 4 games. I would be willing to – Ian, if you're interested in taking the over there, I would be interested in taking the under.
There's not a – what would you put that at? Because the line's not up yet because of
we have on Hundley 17.6.
Oh, my bad.
Projection.
I thought you meant the game total. Yeah, so you want that under? I'll take that over. I mean, we just saw him go up against Pittsburgh, and I think this Buccaneers secondary is, I think, way worse than Pittsburgh.
Definitely
even without Hayden.
Worse.
Yeah, give me the over. I didn't think I'd be back in Brett Hundley right now, but here we are.
All right. Levitan, you want in on that?
I don't think so, man. I think when you bring price into play, it makes more sense than just like a raw projection. And I think, we have him now projected really high. So we'll go ahead. For those people that don't know, we have initial projections, and then we kind of massage them and work on them throughout the week, and they become more finalized Thursday, Friday. So I think we might be a little bit high on him. So I'd be inclined to be under 17.6 on Hundley.
Sweet. Take the under. Go for it.
I just took it. Against who, though?
Against Ian.
Yeah, I got the over. I'll take it.
Well, Ian has to accept double action. You can't just be handing out 12 packs of Coors Light without asking.
Oh, I'm accepting.
He's accepting. I think if you throw it out there, you have to be willing to accept action from anyone.
Okay. That's
how it works.
Okay, book.
It's as if this is your first time on the show, Levitan. What's happening?
You guys hear Dirk Coder? He's like, we ran 14 coverages against Julio Jones, and none of them would work. I don't know, man. I don't know how they're going to stop. I don't know how they're going to stop anyone, man. I think that team's broke.
Yeah, they have no pass rush. I think that's really their biggest issue. Like, it's really bad to have like no talent at corner and then also a really bad pass rush. So it's a bad combination.
Okay, that's like being an asshole who's not good looking. Let's go to running backs. I'm interested in Todd Gurley. I'd be willing to take the over if anyone wants the under.
Yeah. What do we have, 21.1?
Yeah, 21.1.
Yeah, I'll take the under there. We've seen the Rams offense not perform that well in reasonably tough matchups on the road. Not that this is an extremely difficult matchup, but I think this game could be lower scoring than people think.
I agree with that. I think that's very possible.
I'll take the over on that, though. I think Gurley's so good, and he's basically, looking at these top backs, even more. Yeah, we can probably safely say he has the largest secured workload, I think, than anyone else on the slate, especially inside the 5-yard line in that receiving role. So, Yeah, I'll take that over.
Yeah, and you mentioned there the keywords anyone on the slate. Can we just for a second mention how ridiculous it is that for multiple weeks in a row we are not seeing the Steelers on the main slate? It's just they're playing on Thursday, they're playing on Sunday night, they're playing on Monday night. It's just for till week 16 or something like that, we don't get them on the main slate. It's a total travesty. Okay. So we had some Todd Gurley action there. Levitan, anyone that you're interested in?
I like the LaShawn McCoy call that Ian's on. I'd be willing to take him. I'd take him versus Gurley if you guys want.
I'll do that.
I would take. I will take. I'll let you. If any of you guys want to give me two guys versus Kamara, I'll take that. Two guys not named Gurley or McCoy versus Kamara, I would take.
Wait, you want Kamara?
No, do I look like a guy who wants Kamara?
Well, that's what I was. Okay. Well, that's what had me confused. So you want us to take Kamara. You want us to take the guy we all know is overvalued.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not so interested in that, but I will do the raw projection. I'll take the over on the raw projection if you want the under.
Fine. I don't even know what it is, but I'm fine with the under.
The raw projection right now that we have, let me look.
For Kamara, we got 18.4.
Yeah, 18.4.
I'll take the under as well.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, over on both of y'all.
All right.
Yeah, we didn't mention Devontae Booker either. I'm curious to see what they're going to do going forward, but he's 4,100, and he did lead the team in running back snaps and touches. I was a little disappointed they still were giving Jamal Charles work. Just seems like so stupid. If this goes down to a two-man committee where Devontae Booker is clearly ahead of C.J. Anderson, it'd be pretty interesting against Miami at 4,100 with Simeon back in the saddle. So, I like Booker and I like Drake both in that game under 5K. But
well, so that's interesting. So my question is, like, how willing are you to roster multiple cheap running backs who are somewhat speculative in terms of maybe not even necessarily their touches, but in terms of like their capacity to do something with those touches. Yeah. And then that they're in the same game and they have the ability to sort of like that negative correlation limit each other's playing time.
So certainly a concern. I probably won't end up playing Booker just because it's hard to tell when they're going to cut out Charles or how much they're going to do CJ Anderson's workload. I think that Drake is far more secure just because there's no other competition. And yeah, the point about playing running backs in the same game, certainly not ideal. And I think we have in our multi-lineup builder, we have an option you can check in the box that says no running backs, no opposing running backs. I click that sometimes, not all the time. I think when you have two pass catching backs, it can certainly work. And I think both Booker and Drake play okay in the pass game or play well in the pass game. So, it's not a situation I'd be that worried about if I felt better about Booker's role.
Mm-hmm. Ian, any running backs you want to throw out there?
I was about to ask you guys how you feel about Jordan Howard. He's kind of in that tweener price range right now. Home favorite, don't usually see that. I'd be willing to take Dion Lewis for $1,000 cheaper, straight up over Jordan Howard, if anyone's interested.
I'll take Jordan Howard.
Yeah, the last time I was in this spot with Jordan Howard, I begrudgingly played him on DK at home against the Packers, and it was just a stone disaster because the Bears defense didn't show up, and then Jordan Howard just wasn't on the field. Jimmy Garoppolo will start this game for the 49ers. If there's any shred, if I think there's any shred that the 49ers can go in there and play well, I would never touch Jordan Howard at 6,500. So there's it's I don't see any middling outcomes from Jordan Howard. Either he plays really well and has a huge number, or he has 3 DK points in this spot. So I think I like him better than Dion Lewis, though. So I'll take the Jordan Howard side.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, regardless of all of the other situations, and the addition of Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely something to take into account, the 49ers still allowed the most fantasy points to opposing backfields. So it is a really nice matchup for him, and that ineptitude versus running backs isn't just a one-season thing. That's something that has been there for the last 3 years, ever since the Jim Harbaugh era ended. So a really nice spot for him, and I think as long as that game stays reasonably close, the Bears really want to be run-heavy, given how poorly Trubisky has played recently. So, yeah, I'll definitely be on the Jordan Howard side. Ian, any other running backs you want to take a look at? Ian.
Yeah, I'm looking. That was pretty good. I think it's worth on the Garoppolo subject, I'm not sure we should be expecting all these checkdowns to Carlos Hyde on a weekly basis anymore. I mean, that dude's seen 13 targets last week, 3 targets and 11 targets. I mean, seems to me like that was more C.J. Beathard checking the ball down. I mean, we haven't seen a ton of Garoppolo, but what we have seen is he looks like a real quarterback. So maybe he can get the overall direction of the offense moving up. But I'm not sure if Carlos Hyde, even though Shanahan, he's broken career highs in receptions and stuff, and Shanahan puts him in a good position to succeed. But I think those targets we were seeing the last few weeks are a little bit insane, and probably won't be seeing those moving forward.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's go to wide receivers. Ian, I know that you are higher on DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know how Levitan is on him. I'm willing to take the over on Hopkins. We have 17.2 Levitan. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so the concern when you play the Titans is that their coaching staff is so inept. They just play so slow. It's like, God, man, like they played such a conservative game plan last week. It was like sickening. So from a play perspective, I do have some concerns. Always going to be a concern when Tom Savage goes on the road. But, I mean, Ian mentioned it. DeAndre Hopkins is just unbelievable. So 17.2, I believe, is what we have. I mean, I'll take the under just to give you guys some action, but I think that's pretty fair.
Levitan, is there a player you like where maybe I can give some equity back?
Do you want to be low on Manny Sanders or DT?
Sure. I don't mind being low on them. I mean, I think it's a sharp spot there, but I don't mind being low on them.
Okay, booked. Do you want to be high on Seth Roberts?
Not particularly.
I actually think, I mean, Seth Roberts is like he was of the guys left. I think that Derek Carr is pretty clearly the most comfortable with him, and he's 3,700. Like, I haven't done my target projections yet, but I would guess that he's going to end up in like the 7 to 8 range for 3,700, which you really don't see very often on DK anymore.
Yeah, I feel that's fair. I think that's also like last year, week 1, danger Tajay Sharp territory, where like maybe he ends up hitting value, but it could just be a total travesty.
Honestly, it's a little weird how much Derek Carr loves Seth Roberts. He had 21 red zone targets last year.
Yeah,
that was with Amari and Crabtree active. So I don't know how good he is, but Derek Carr loves the guy.
Yeah, exactly. I obviously want to be high on all the team preseason guys. Robbie Anderson, Dede Westbrook come to mind right away. Robbie obviously is a regression candidate after last week, does have a good matchup against the Chiefs, and Dede is 4,100, which is egregious for the reigning president.
Yeah, I'm with you on those guys. I love both of those guys, so I can't. I mean, if Ian's interested in fading them, I would be on your side. Ian, do you have any thoughts on them?
Nah, I love me some Dede. I want to hear Adam. You willing to fade Tyreek on the road, man? The guy makes magic happen on the road.
That is a trash split, I think. Like,
okay, it's a trash split, but it's happened like 12 out of 13 times at this point. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean,
not this year that much, right?
He's still smashing on the road. I actually do like this spot too, man. I mean, we got Morris Claiborne's been balling this year, but I mean, Tyreek can outrun it. I feel like Claiborne's way better suited for like a Dez type, a guy that's more physical than speedy. So I do like the spot for Tyreek, and I don't know if we're just. I mean, that was the single worst Chiefs offensive display we've seen this season last week. So, I mean, I think it makes sense if they're going to get back on track. Their wide receiver 1 would have a major role in that. But
yeah, so it's the same every week with Ty Fluke, right? Is he going to catch a ball at the 40-yard line and like somehow make it into the end zone as time expires in the first half? Is he going to return a punt for a touchdown? Is he going to take a kickoff back for a touchdown? If he does, then yeah, he's going to smash. If he doesn't, then he's going to end up with like 6 for 60 in a best case scenario. But yeah, the ceiling is always there. So like as his ownership percentage goes down, I would say that Tyreek becomes a better and better play.
Okay, well, let's book some action on that. So Ian,
yeah, I'm fine under. I don't care. Yeah, of course.
Great. Yeah, okay. I got the over on that. I mean, I think Tyreek's floor is a little bit under. I mean, I think his floor is a little bit higher than people give it credit for. He's still getting 6 or 7 targets per game, and the fact he can take any of those for 80 yards and a touchdown in any given play is something most people don't have. I mean, yeah, so I'll take the over.
Do we have any more information on Rashard Matthews?
He's still considered day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, he was really close to playing, so I would guess that he'll be back.
Okay. Because, I mean, the Texans have been so bad against opposing wide receivers that there is some interest, I think, in him or in Corey Davis. Although I kind of hate to say that just because I don't trust that offense at all. But, yeah, I don't know, that's marginally interesting to me. Are there any other wide receivers we want to touch on?
I think the Corey Davis spot is decent because everyone was on him last week. And, I mean, he disappointed, but he still caught 4 of 4 targets. He had a really nice grab on their last drive or second to last drive. Like you said, though, I mean, he was getting 8 or 9 targets per game in the previous weeks, and we really saw Mariota spread it out, which he's really done his entire career. I mean, even when Richard went off last year, he was kind of doing it on like 7 or 8 targets per game. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Hard to really tell in that spot. But if Richard's out again, I'm back in on Corey.
Okay, one more here, and I feel horrible doing this. T.Y. Hilton, I'll take the over. Both of you just take the under, and we'll move on. Cool. It's 9.5 points.
Great.
I mean, 9.5 is so low, but that's what the projection should be. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
going against the Jags.
Right.
Terrible spot for him. All right, let's hit tight ends to close it out. Jared Cook. Did we already do one on him or no?
I think I just had my bold call was Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry. Okay, so I'm interested in Jared Cook. I'll do the over if anyone wants to take the under.
Yeah, 11.4 seems fair. I think the bigger issue is price on Jared Cook than his projection. So with 5,400, I think is bigger concern to me than the projection. So I'll pass on that.
Okay.
Do you guys have an opinion on why the Giants were able to just completely shut down Vernon Davis last week? I mean, that really came out of absolutely nowhere. I'm a little bit worried that if Jared Cook's going to be the outright number one option on this offense, I mean, Landon Collins a baller. Maybe they double him every play. I don't know. I'll take the under.
All right. I think that's fair. Levitan, you want some Hunter Henry action, I'm assuming?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Where do we have him right now?
We have 9.1.
Oh, yeah. That feels low.
I mean, so the whole question is like, how are they going to use him? It's like, just because in the past, like just because he's had good games and played a ton doesn't mean that's how it's going to be the next week. So it's really hard to say. It's really like, that's another thing people should realize about like median projections. Like, it is extremely difficult, and like people shouldn't be taking this as like median projection as the gospel. That's why the models are there to kind of balance some of that out. So you're using more things outside of median projection because, like, I mean, Hunter Henry could be anywhere from 30 snaps to 60 snaps this game, and it's really hard to tell. So, yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
All right. Well, so I'll give you some action on the under, although I do like Hunter Henry if you want to take the over there.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Ian, do you have any tight ends you want to get some action on?
Yeah, I'll take the over on Austin Seferian-Jenkins if anyone's interested. I think his bad luck on these touchdown reversals is going to right itself eventually.
All right, I'll take the under.
All right.
I'll stick with Ian. I'll take over. Yeah, ASJ has run worse than anybody on like the planet this year.
I will do the over on Evan Ingram if you guys are interested in the under.
No, Gino's going to play well, and Ingram's going to be a big part of it.
Ian?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty cool with Ingram over.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts here to put a bow on the analysis of the slate?
I think we should get a true Geno Smith scouting report from you coming out of college through his career now to the moment that we've all been waiting for.
Hey, look for it in the quarterback breakdown, which will come out on Wednesday.
Wow.
Actually, I did some research. I did some digging this afternoon. So yeah, it's not going to be full, but I mean, Geno Smith he was very good in college. Like, I mean, part of it is a question of whether he was a system quarterback. But yeah, I think he might be better than people give him credit for. I mean, it's hard to, I think, put too much weight on what we saw those first 2 years in New York with Rex Ryan. I mean, I think if Jared Goff, if the example we see out of him shows us anything, it's that a guy in his first season or his first couple of seasons, if he's with a head coach who's just unimaginative and they're really tying him down with a poor offensive play caller, that might not mean much for what he can do in the future if he's with a guy who can do something with him. Not to say that Ben McAdoo is someone who can do anything with a quarterback, but Geno might not be horrible. So, yeah, Geno Smith, I will cover him in the quarterback breakdown. Yeah, Ian, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go on the record and I'm going to be team not Geno. I think he's going to be awful. The Giants haven't scored 30 points since McAdoo's taken over at head coach. Sterling Shepard, their best receiver, might be out. Yeah, I mean, I'm out on Geno.
So, yeah, that's a big concern, right? Like, you go on the road with Travis Rudolph and who else? Tavares King and Roger Lewis, and no run game and a bad offensive line. Like, Geno is not set up well to perform, which is why I said that finding the 900 to get to Tyrod in cash would be almost imperative to me.
All right, I definitely hear you there. It is a precarious spot, but at least he does have a nice matchup against the Oakland Raiders. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show. It's unfortunate again that we couldn't get a guest really to spice it up, but I think we carried it. We've been speaking with Adam Levitan and Ian Hartitz on Twitter at Adam Levitan and iHartitz. You can follow me on Twitter at MattFTheOracle. I'm Matthew Freedman, and this has been the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast for Week 13. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck, and we will see you next week.